Al Dhafra Air Base, United Arab Emirates, 60 kilometers southeast of Abu Dhabi in the flat desert that characterizes the interior of the Arabian Peninsula in the way that flat and desert characterize most things in this part of the world. Al Dhafra is not a base that appears frequently in civilian news coverage, which is the way its operators prefer it. It is, however, one of the most consequential military installations in the Middle East, a base that has hosted U.S. Air Force operations continuously since the Gulf War, that sits within range of virtually every operationally significant location in the Gulf region. And that contains, on this particular morning, something that the Houthi drone cell commander in Yemen has been told about by his Iranian advisors and has decided to prioritize: the F-35A Lightning II. 5 of them on the ramp at Al Dhafra, visible in satellite imagery that circulates among the parties who track these things. The Houthi drone program has been developing for years. Its primary targets have been Saudi infrastructure, Emirati airports, and U.S. and allied naval assets in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. The program's sponsors in Tehran have been interested in escalating its ambition. A drone strike on a base hosting F-35s is, in the narrative architecture of the campaign, a statement of considerable strategic weight. The cell commander has assembled 14 Shahed-131 one-way attack drones, a slightly smaller and shorter-range variant than the Shahed-136 with a warhead of approximately 15 kilograms, a cruising speed of approximately 180 kilometers per hour, and a GPS plus inertial guidance system that represents the current Iranian export configuration for this class of weapon. 14 drones, launched in sequence from 3 positions in Yemen, timed to arrive at Al Dhafra on a converging approach from multiple vectors, in the early morning hours when the base's tempo is lower and the runway lights are on for the pre-dawn flight operations that U.S. Air Force forward-deployed units conduct as a matter of standard practice. The plan requires a sophisticated understanding of the base's operational patterns. The cell commander has that understanding assembled from months of observation through commercial satellite imagery services, open-source flight tracking data, and the intelligence picture provided by the Iranian advisors who have been involved in targeting Al Dhafra for considerably longer than the Houthis have been launching drones. What the plan does not fully account for, what the months of satellite observation and open-source analysis cannot reveal with the precision that matters, is the complete defensive architecture that surrounds Al Dhafra and has been there in continuously updated form since the base began hosting U.S. Air Force operations. The AN/TPY-2 radar. The AN/TPY-2, the radar component of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, is a transportable X-band active electronically scanned array radar that was designed to detect and track ballistic missile warheads in the upper atmosphere at ranges that make the numbers feel like they require verification. It can detect a ballistic missile warhead at ranges exceeding 800 kilometers in its forward-deployed radar mode. Against slower, lower targets, like commercial pattern drones flying at low altitude at 180 kilometers per hour, its detection capability begins considerably earlier than any Houthi mission planner would calculate from the drone's published performance parameters. The AN/TPY-2 at Al Dhafra is not publicly acknowledged. Its presence can be inferred by anyone who studies U.S. air defense deployments in the Gulf region with sufficient attention. The Houthi cell commander and his Iranian advisors are not uninformed people. They have been tracking U.S. military deployments in the region for years. What they may not have fully weighted is the specific detection range the AN/TPY-2 achieves against a Shahed-131's radar cross-section at its cruising altitude and what that detection range means for the warning time available to Al Dhafra's Air Defense Command. The 14 drones launched from Yemen into a sky that had been watching them since they were loaded on their launchers. Here is the operational sequence that followed, described precisely because the precision is what makes it instructive. The AN/TPY-2 detected the first contacts approximately 47 minutes after launch. The drones were still over Yemeni airspace when the radar picture resolved their tracks with sufficient fidelity to begin building engagement solutions. 47 minutes of warning time against a threat traveling at 180 kilometers per hour is, in air defense terms, an extraordinary working margin. It is the difference between a managed, layered, sequential engagement with every system properly positioned, and a hasty, compressed engagement where the geometry is controlled by the threat rather than the defender. Al Dhafra's Air Defense Command received the warning with 47 minutes available. The command's first action was notification to the base commander, to CENTCOM Air Operations, to the UAE's Integrated Air Defense Command, and to the crew of the AN/TWQ-1 Avenger Air Defense Systems positioned on the base perimeter. The second action was posturing, essence in getting every air defense asset into the configuration the engagement geometry required, distributing engagement authority, coordinating the deconfliction between systems that were about to operate in overlapping engagement envelopes. The systems available were not trivial. The THAAD battery, the full terminal high-altitude area defense battery with its launcher vehicles, command and control elements, and the AN/TPY-2 radar decoder was the long-range layer. THAAD is designed to intercept ballistic missile warheads in the terminal phase at high altitude. The system's intercept mechanism is kinetic. The interceptor does not carry an explosive warhead. It destroys its target by direct collision at closing speeds that generate enough kinetic energy to disintegrate whatever it hits. This is not a subtle engagement method. What THAAD does to a ballistic missile warhead, it would do with equivalent thoroughness to a Shahed-131. The drone is slower, lower, and substantially less challenging as a target. Against a Shahed-131, THAAD is significantly overqualified. Using it is the air defense equivalent of using a Formula One car to drive to the grocery store. The THAAD battery commander was aware of this. He was also aware that the engagement geometry for his system against the incoming tracks was workable, that he had time to execute selective engagement against the contacts that could be addressed at range, and that leaving the close-in engagements to the system designed for close-in work was the correct layered approach. He selected 4 contacts at extended range for his system, the contacts whose approach vectors gave the cleanest geometry and the most favorable debris field location, and passed the remaining 10 to the Avenger and C-RAM systems. The Centurion C-RAM, counter-rocket, artillery, and mortar. Phalanx system deployed at Al Dhafra is the same 20mm rotary cannon that the Navy uses as a ship-based terminal defense system, ground-mounted and configured for base protection. 4,500 rounds per minute against targets moving at 180 km per hour is an engagement that proceeds at the speed of arithmetic. The C-RAM crew had the incoming track picture distributed to their displays before the drones had crossed the Saudi border. The F-35As on the ramp were not, on this particular morning, the morning's primary defensive tool. They were, however, generating a specific kind of interest among the base's air defense staff. Here is the genuine tension, because this story has one. 14 drones on converging vectors timed to arrive approximately simultaneously represent an engagement sequencing problem. Layered air defense systems can address multiple simultaneous contacts. That is what layered means, but the layer assignments require accurate track data and clear engagement authority delegation. If the track picture is degraded, if some contacts are in clutter, or if the timing of the wave produces contacts that appear in the wrong sequence for the planned engagement schedule, the sequencing problem becomes real. 3 of the 14 drones were flying on a vector that took them through a terrain-masked approach corridor, a geographic feature of the Yemeni landscape that reduced radar coverage during the first portion of their flight. The AN/TPY-2 acquired them later than the other 11, approximately 11 minutes later, which at their speed represented roughly 33 kilometers of unconfirmed track. For those 11 minutes, the track picture showed 11 confirmed contacts and 3 projected contacts. And the 3 projected contacts had a potential approach vector uncertainty that made their assignment to specific engagement systems less clean than the other 11. The Air Defense Command had 11 clean engagements, and 3 that required a short period of additional track refinement. The C-RAM crews were tasked with the 3 while the THAAD and Avenger systems addressed the confirmed 11. 11 minutes. This is the window. Not a dramatic window. The base was not in danger of being overwhelmed. The defensive posture was solid, and the track refinement happened on schedule. But 11 minutes during which the complete engagement picture was not as precise as it was before and after is the real tension in the story, and it deserves acknowledgement. The AN/TPY-2 achieved confirmed track on all 3 terrain-masked contacts before they cleared the Yemeni border. The engagement picture was complete. The sequence was executed. The specific engagement sequence took 19 minutes from first intercept to final contact addressed. THAAD addressed 4 contacts at extended range. The engagement geometry for these was clean, the approach vectors were predictable, and the THAAD battery commander exercised his engagement authority at ranges that kept the debris field well outside the base perimeter. 4 contacts addressed at range, debris in the desert between Yemen and the UAE. The Avenger AIM-9X systems address 6 contacts at medium range, the short-range man-portable version of the same infrared-guided missile that the Navy's F-A-18S carry, mounted on a ground vehicle with its own acquisition radar and autonomous engagement capability. 6 contacts, 6 AIM-9X engagements. The AIM-9X's probability of engagement against a slow, non-maneuvering, propeller-driven drone is in the category of numbers that weapons systems engineers describe as "in the noise," meaning the engagement failure modes that exist in the test data are not the failure modes that a Shahed-131 presents. The AIM-9X is designed to defeat a maneuvering supersonic fighter at high off-bore sight angles. A drone flying straight at 180 kilometers per hour is, for the AIM-9X, the simplest problem it knows how to solve. 6 contacts, 6 solutions. The CRAM addressed the remaining 4 contacts, the 3 terrain-masked drones, and 1 contact that the THAAD battery commander elected to pass to the CRAM because the engagement geometry for his system had closed to a range where the Phalanx's engagement was more efficient than the THAAD's. 4 contacts. The 20mm rotary cannon fired for a total of approximately 3 seconds across the 4 engagements. The CRAM's engagement record showed 4 contacts, 4 confirmed intercepts, engagement duration consistent with a system that was not particularly challenged by what it was asked to do. The first drone reached its planned engagement altitude, the altitude from which a Shahed-131 is intended to begin its terminal dive toward its target, and found an intercept solution already computed and executed before it had completed the altitude transition. No contact reached the base perimeter. The F-35As on the ramp were not disturbed. One of the F-35 pilots, arriving at his aircraft for the pre-dawn sortie brief, was told by the crew chief that there had been some CRAM activity on the perimeter earlier. The pilot asked how many. The crew chief said 4 for the Phalanx, 6 for the Avengers, 4 for the THAAD. The pilot nodded, signed the maintenance forms, and began his pre-flight inspection. The form did not have a checkbox for this. Now let us discuss what Al Dhafra's air defense systems revealed about the Houthi drone program and about themselves during the 19-minute engagement, because every engagement is simultaneously an operation and a collection event. The 14 Shahed-131s launched on GPS-guided routes that were in the ground control station's navigation system before they were loaded on the launchers. The navigation data, the waypoints, the approach vectors, the terminal altitude, represents the Houthi cell's targeting solution for Al Dhafra. This is operationally significant information because it defines how the cell characterizes the approach geometry they believe is optimal for this specific base. Knowing the approach geometry they prefer tells defenders where to focus their terrain masking assessment for future attacks and where the surveillance architecture should be improved to reduce the early track gap. The 3 terrain-masked contacts revealed a specific gap in the AN/TPY-2's coverage geometry. Not a catastrophic gap, not one that compromised the engagement, but a defined and measurable gap that the Air Defense Command now knows about with the precision that comes from a real contact revealing it rather than a theoretical analysis predicting it. The gap will be addressed. The adjustment to the radar's positioning or the supplementary coverage assets will be made based on the specific geometry that the 3 contacts exploited. The Houthi cell provided, by attacking, the data that will close the gap their attack revealed. This is the operational irony of every unsuccessful attack against a defended installation. It is simultaneously an intelligence event that improves the defense. The engagement also produced the first live operational data on Shahed-131 guidance system performance under the specific GPS jamming environment, that Al Dhafra's electronic warfare infrastructure maintains: GPS jamming, degrading the satellite navigation signal in the vicinity of a protected installation is a standard defensive measure against GPS-guided threats. Whether the Shahed-131's guidance system responds to GPS degradation by switching to pure inertial navigation, by exhibiting course deviation, or by other observable behaviors is a question that live engagement data answers in a way that ground-based testing cannot fully replicate. 4 of the 14 contacts showed measurable course deviation in the terminal phase that is consistent with GPS signal degradation. Their tracks showed slight divergence from the expected GPS-guided approach vector in the final minutes before intercept. 10 showed no measurable deviation. The guidance performance data, which drones deviated and by how much, is in the engagement record. It tells analysts something about the variation in guidance system quality across the current Houthi Shahed-131 inventory and whether the production process is maintaining consistent GPS receiver performance. These are questions that matter for future electronic warfare programming. The Houthi media response was, by the standards of the campaign, ambitious. The broadcast described a successful drone operation targeting the Zionist American military base at Al Dhafra. The operation had struck its targets and demonstrated the capability of the Islamic resistance to reach deep into the territory of American allies. The footage was dramatic. Launcher vehicles in the pre-dawn, the drones on their platforms, the launch sequence, all captured with the production quality that the Houthi media operation has developed into a genuine competency. The words "struck its targets" require examination against the engagement record. The engagement record shows 14 contacts, 14 intercepts, 0 contacts reaching the base perimeter, 0 damage to any facility or aircraft on the base. The F-35s were unaffected. The ramp was undamaged. The crew chief's conversation with the F-35 pilot about the morning's CRAM activity represents the closest the drones came to any operational consequence for the aircraft they were sent to threaten. The gap between struck its targets and the engagement record is 14 drone lengths wide. The Houthi cell commander, wherever he was operating from, had no direct observation of what happened to his drones after they crossed into UAE airspace. He launched. He waited. He received no confirmation of impact from any of the 14 contacts. The absence of confirmation is itself ambiguous. Drones on one-way attacks do not return. So the absence of impact confirmation can be interpreted as either successful mission completion or unsuccessful engagement, depending on what other information is available. The cell commander had no other information that would resolve the ambiguity. He resolved it the way the Houthi campaign always resolves ambiguity, in favor of the narrative that serves the campaign's purposes. The broadcast was confident, the claim was emphatic. The gap between the claim and the engagement record will remain invisible to the audience the broadcast is designed to reach. The AN/TPY-2 is back in surveillance mode. The THAAD launchers are reloaded, not from the UAE's ammunition stockpile, but from the U.S. military's forward-deployed reserve, which exists for exactly this purpose. The CRAM ammunition consumed in 4 3-second bursts is a number that does not require replenishment from emergency reserves. The Avenger AIM-9X expended are notable on the resupply manifest, but not operationally significant in terms of the base's current defensive capacity. The F-35A that took off for its pre-dawn mission completed its sortie and returned to the ramp. The crew chief was there when it landed. He asked the pilot if the flight was routine. The pilot said yes. The crew chief made a note in the maintenance log that had nothing to do with drones. Al Dhafra is back to its normal operational tempo. The F-35s are on the ramp. The AN/TPY-2 is watching. It is always watching, that is what it does. And what it was watching for before the drones launched, and what it will be watching for after this morning's summary has been filed and distributed. The CRAM crews are at readiness. The THAAD battery is reloaded. The gap in the radar coverage geometry revealed by the 3 terrain-masked contacts is being assessed. The adjustment will be made before the next Houthi planning cycle has time to exploit the same corridor twice. The Houthi cell is planning the next mission. It is planning it against a base that is now marginally better defended than it was before the previous mission revealed the specific geometry of the terrain massed approach corridor. The planning cycle will not account for this improvement, because the cell has no visibility into the defensive adjustments that follow an unsuccessful attack. It will plan the next mission as if the gap still exists. The gap will not still exist. The crew chief's conversation with the pilot covered 11 words. The engagement it described took 19 minutes and addressed 14 contacts. The broadcast that claimed to describe the same event ran for 4 minutes and mentioned none of the 19 minutes' contents. The F-35s on the ramp did not move. They were never going to have to. Bye for now.